Let's be consistent.
Welcome to the Key to Consistency. I am your host, Rakeyia Collins, and on today's episode, we are going to be exploring the relationship between consistency and cooking, specifically home cooking. Guys, when I tell you I am so excited about this topic because it really has changed my life recently. I've gotten into home cooking. And I was joking with my mom this morning. I'm like, you're into home cooking when you go to the store and you buy like a thermometer. Like I went to the store today and I bought a thermometer because I'm pescatarian. And so I wanted to make sure that when I was making chicken for someone that I love, that the chicken was like the right internal temperature without having to like look at it and say, it looks okay, but I'm not sure if it's actually okay or not. It was just so funny because I was like, I've gotten so deep into like outside of like your basic seasonings, like your garlic powder, onion powder, salt, pepper. I'm really trying to get into like my smoked paprika, like the oreganos, the tamarind sauce, the Worcestershire sauce. Y'all know the W sauce, right? Like I'm trying to get into my chef bag, right? I'm not going to hold you. And so I am just so excited for today's topic and for us to kind of dive in. So of course, the first thing we're going to talk about is just the advantages of home cooking. When you cook at home, right, you have complete control over the ingredients that makes it to your plate and most importantly, your family's plate. You can control how you tailor your meals, how much salt, how much sugar is going to go into the food that you're feeding your family and making sure that the food is as nourishing as possible. I love that because when you don't have complete control or you surrender control to someone else, you're at the mercy of hopefully you washed your hands, right? Hopefully you didn't put too much salt in this. Hopefully, and it just becomes a guessing game. And I think that food is one of those things that we do not need to guess with. We need to know and go in with just a complete understanding that I'm going to have control over this, right? And of course, when we think about preparing your meals, it's way more cost effective than eating at a restaurant because I'm not only paying for the food, I'm paying for some of the overhead of the restaurant. I'm tipping the servers, which of course we should all do, tipping the person who does the valet. It becomes a complete event, right? I would encourage you, of course, if you're looking to save money, eating at home is a great way as well to be able to save money and also reduce some food wastage as well. I'm sure, especially if you live in America, there's been a rise of these companies that will cook food or like these meal prep services that will bring food to your home and like kind of have it already seasoned up for you. You just have to like cook it. I think that those services are great and they bring us a step closer to actually cooking at home and actually making the food ourselves. So especially shout out to you if you're like, hey, I'm too busy to try to have all that stuff. I don't even want to have all that stuff. I would much rather have a meal prep delivery service just bring the food to me. Shout out to you because you are a step closer and you may want to stay there and you may be comfortable with that. Shout out to you. Right? Shout out to you. One thing I've noticed in doing my own prep for today's episode, I didn't realize that there are foods that in America are allowed that are not allowed in other countries, right? And that kind of goes back to the importance of knowing what is in your food and knowing what you put into your body and your family's body, right? So when we think about something like arsenic, for example, arsenic is used in some chicken feed and it helps make the meat appear pinker and fresher. But to put it bluntly, arsenic is poison and it can kill you if you digest it enough, right? That was banned in the EU. And I learned that from a blog on BuzzFeed. I did not know that was being put in chicken. And I have family that eat chicken. And I'm like, hey, you guys might want to stop with the poultry. I can't say at this point, of course, seafood is getting a better rap just because of the ocean and farm raised versus wild caught. You guys know that argument. But ultimately, just to say that I think it's important that we monitor and that we're cognizant of what we're putting in our bodies. Another thing that I thought was very interesting is something called brominated vegetable oil. So it makes food dye stick to liquid, right? But it causes birth defects and major organ damage. So when we think about sports drinks and citrus flavored sodas, they essentially have this vegetable oil in them, because that's what's allowing your Mountain Dew to be green. Like, I know they have different colors of Mountain Dew, like the red and the orange and the blue, right? Like, what's causing that color to stick to the liquid is this brominated vegetable oil. And that is a chemical. You'll be surprised that it was used to stop carpets from catching on fire. So you can kind of see why drinking it is not the best idea. It has really been linked to major organ damage, birth defects, growth problems, schizophrenia, and hearing loss. This is banned in over 100 countries. And so it's wild to me that when we think about what we can and cannot do and put in our family's body, I would encourage you, of course, nobody who works a regular 9 to 5 would generally have enough time to kind of dive deeper into this type of stuff, because I don't. I'll be honest with you, I don't. But I would encourage you to follow people who do. Follow people who've shown that they are nutritionalists and they do this. They've been doing this for a while now. I can tell you one of my favorites. I think his name is Bobby, and he has a YouTube channel. He has a mobile application called Bobby Approved. I think his recommendations are great, but if you don't like Bobby's content, there are other people as well who really take the time to digest the facts of the labels and really break things down and really tell you why this may or may not be your best choice. And so, of course, when we think about choices, we have to think about the choice of choosing to eat at home, and not just eat at home, but also creating healthier meals. I know on last week's episode, we talked about family and creating family bonds. There are few things that create stronger family bonds than making meals together. When you cook at home, you have the ability to, one, go to the grocery store, which some of us kind of look at as a chore. But what if it just became a family adventure? And you guys made a game out of it, and you divided up the grocery list, and let's say you have older kids, and you set the timer for them to get the items on their list and bring it back to you if you didn't want to go in the grocery store, right? And you're like sitting at the front of the store doing whatever you're doing, and you have the list divided up 3 different ways, right? Like, you can make it a game from the onset of the process, which starts at the grocery store, and bringing that stuff home and being able to cook that stuff as a family. Making sure that when you are getting the food, that as much as you possibly can, you're selecting things that are fresh, that have whole ingredients, and really steering clear of any like excessive sugars or unhealthy fats that are really found in those processed foods. It is a surefire guarantee way to help you boost your overall health, right? When you partake in healthy eating and you combine it with your family as well, you can have conversations while you're chopping your veggies, right? On the way to the grocery store, on the way from the grocery store, you guys can laugh about the joyous excursion that you made a regular Publix or Walmart or Kroger trip. You turned it into something super fun, right? And you can really echo those laughters not only while you're cooking, but also while you're at the dinner table, right? Those are the types of moments that create what I love to call forever moments. And so I would encourage you to make as many forever moments as you possibly can with your family. Those forever moments really are the things that your children and even you yourself are going to remember. So making sure that outside of course, incorporating your family where you can, if you just think about it for your own like personal preference, being a chef and really, LOL, I said being a chef. Guys, I am not a chef. You guys know I'm not a chef, but this is how much I've convinced myself that I have become a chef. I'm calling myself a chef. But when we're in the kitchen, what I was going to say was that being in the kitchen unlocks our inner chef. It really allows us to recognize different flavors over time and begin to understand, okay, I can mix this with that and I can combine those two and put that over the salmon, and that will be amazing because I love those two flavors that I made together last week when I made a different dish. And you can really just begin to look at your kitchen and the art of cooking in a different manner. You can experiment with different spices and tweak recipes and really just discover new techniques, right? And what ultimately ends up happening is that something that you used to look at as a chore, like, I just have to get dinner on the table, can really become something that you carry a large bit of your heart and your soul in something. Right. And so even if that is not enough for you, just really think about the sense of accomplishment that you're going to feel when you make something from scratch. It's truly like creating a masterpiece, and it's going to delight your taste buds and your family's taste buds. And it's just going to fill you with a sense of healthy pride to say, wow, like I actually did this. I actually made this particular meal for my family. I would encourage you, because of the impacts that this can have on your family, because of how your inner chef can be unlocked, and really the money you'd be saving, really prioritizing your family's health are just some of the main benefits of why you should opt to cook from home a bit more, as much as you possibly can. Cooking can also be meditative. It can also be therapeutic. It can help soothe your mind and reduce stress, especially when we prioritize wholesome ingredients and we make it a family event, right? When you get off work at 5, and of course you may be tired from your work, but your kids come in the house and they're like, okay, I've already started chopping up the onions, and you have another one who already turned on the oven. Another one says that they are using the gloves and starting to season the chicken. Like, it just becomes a family affair. And that's one thing that I truly love about just cooking in general. So I would encourage you to really make sure that you think of one meal this week that you can make from home and from scratch, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be a meal that you want to bring the whole family in, especially if this is new to you and you're like, hey, I just want to try it, right? I would encourage you just to think of one meal. It could be breakfast, it could be lunch, it could be dinner, it could be a snack, right? Just prepare it from home. Enjoy the process. Savor the flavors. Go on Pinterest and try to get some ideas for some nice, cool recipes. Enjoy the meal that you're making, and try to remember that this is a celebration of really connection with your family. It is a celebration of your growth as you're inspiring your inner chef and really pulling out your inner chef. And hopefully the stove ignites this passion in you and makes you want to do it, and you don't feel like it's a chore anymore. It's honestly a privilege. It's something that you get to do. You get to have the control to be able to authorize what goes in your family's body versus giving that type of control over to someone else. Today's episode is brought to you by the merch shop at thekeytoconsistency.com. I would encourage you to visit our merch shop to see if there's anything that piques your interest. One of the easiest ways to be consistent is to be visually reminded that you are on a mission. You are going to be consistent. So whether you pick up a phone case or you pick up a t-shirt, we have something for you. Again, that is www.thekeytoconsistency.com. And I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. Awesome, guys. So the next major part of our episode, I wanted to talk through the importance of establishing a consistent cooking routine, right? So what does that really look like? Meal prep is going to be your, of course, key, but outside of meal prep, there's something else that I didn't even think about in advance, but meal planning. Meal planning is so important. It is crazy how important meal planning is. It is your secret weapon. If you take a few minutes each week just to make sure that you decide, okay, which meals am I going to cook for my family? Which days am I going to make enough for them to have leftovers to take to lunch the next day, right? Like this process of not meal prepping, right? That comes after. meal planning comes before meal prepping. It helps you save time and it helps you stay organized because you no longer have to deal with those last minute dinner dilemmas. You don't have to think about, man, this is like, I have to just, scramble home and try to throw something together, right? If you plan it in advance, I know for me, I like to use the Notes app on my phone, and I like to have like those cute little check boxes, if you will. So when I'm grocery shopping, I can just put the meals. I generally bold my meals, and then I'll put the ingredients underneath it. And the ingredients is what I use the little tick boxes for in the Notes app on my phone. And I'll just kind of tick it off as I go, right? To make sure that I'm able to effectively plan for what I'm going to be eating for that particular week. And remember, when you plan in advance, the most important thing that you are doing is making sure that you are minimizing food waste, because you're not just buying things just to buy things. You're buying things because you know that you actually need them. And sometimes there are times where we may not necessarily be able to get the meal that we want, right? So I will say you can meal plan, but life is still going to life. Right? So what I'm saying is flexibility is key, right? Set realistic expectations for yourself. Start with a few meals a week and build up from there, especially if you're new to this. Don't put so much pressure on yourself to where it's like, man, I didn't do this, or because then it's going to become a stressful thing for you, right? Start with a few meals a week, and then from there, just gradually build up, and you'll find a rhythm in that consistency that is going to work for you. Right? The next thing that I want to think through as a part of meal planning is consistently prepping your food, right? If you know you're going to have chicken on Tuesday, prep it and let it sit in the freezer and season it for 2 days. Or even if you don't want to do 2 days, you want to just do one night. Like when you get off work, I know you're tired, you just want to relax. But a part of going on this journey is making sure that you are intentional and you are prioritizing the things that are critical. And I would say the food that goes in your body is critical, and it's critical to make sure that you plan this in your life in a way that is strategic and doesn't become a stressful activity. So what can you do after 5 when you get off of work? Well, number 1, take the chicken out, right? Once the chicken is taken out, if you're going to have chicken the next night, you've already, made whatever you're going to make for dinner today. Go ahead and let that sit out, let that unthaw, season that up, and then put that in the refrigerator. So that way the next day, when you have to come home, if someone comes home before you can, 1, easily provide them with instructions to say, hey, just take this out. It's already prepped. Put it in the oven and turn the oven on. So that way that's already cooking and going while you may still be at work, right? When you prep things in advance, whether it is your poultry, whether it is your vegetables, whether it is pre-cooking some grain, or it doesn't need to be chicken. It could be any type of protein. If you take the time to marinate those things in advance, it really becomes that much more easier for you to have a less hectic day, right? When you think about your home, make sure your kitchen is organized, right? Especially if you're going to do what I mentioned earlier, and that's kind of tag someone else in and say, hey, can you help this? Can you help me with do this or do that? You want to make sure that the kitchen is organized in such a way that they don't have to lift up under things and turn their neck and kind of scratch their head. And you certainly want to make sure that it's a clean kitchen, right? As much as it can possibly be clean. So just make sure that it's tidy and it's accessible. And that also is going to make cooking a more enjoyable experience for you and ultimately for those who may be helping you in this process. And then, of course, when it comes down to saving time, we are not going to always be able to, from the ground up, make these amazing dishes, especially during the weekday when we have other priorities, right? We want to make sure that you have things like a slow cooker, right? You have things like a rice cooker or an air fryer or like a multi-tool type of dish, right? To where you can put whatever you want to put in it. It can be like a pressure cooker, a slow slow cooker, a rice cooker. It does all those different things at the push of a button. You want one of those little gadgets so that way when you aren't necessarily in the kitchen, you may be multitasking and doing one thing and then doing something else, that you can still set it and of course not forget it, but you don't have to worry about burning down your home either. That's personally what I love about a rice cooker. It's like I don't have to immediately run to the stove, as I literally just had to run to the stove because as I'm recording the podcast, I was like, oh, I smell the rice. I have to go turn that off. So I'm honestly preaching to myself with this one as well, that investing in those type of gadgets that keep things warm after they're done cooking is going to save your life. It is amazing. So outside of like those type of appliances, also think about one pot wonders, right? There are amazing dishes that you can make within one pot and you just throw everything in the pot and the pot does the work for you, right? Things that you can put on a sheet pan, right? Those slow cooker dishes that we were talking about earlier, right? Those are fantastic options, not just when you're busy, but really just in general, right? And of course, I'll be remiss to not talk about batch cooking, being able to produce your food in larger quantities and then just freeze them in individual portions whenever you're ready to consume them. Making sure that I always feel pressure to have to think of, okay, what are we going to eat today, right? Again, technology, especially Pinterest, is your friend in this. Make sure that you have online recipes. There are cooking apps and there are just so many things that you can do to help save time and really streamline your cooking process and help you spark some creativity as well. Right. So I would encourage you, as a part of everything we've discussed so far, is to make sure that you're meal planning, make sure that you prep your grocery list and prep whatever you can in advance and really begin to embrace the process and allow yourself to just enjoy the experience of taking control of your kitchen and what goes on in your family's home and what goes on in their bodies as well. You have good intentions. We're going to make sure that we savor every step, and our culinary adventure is just literally one meal away. So of course, guys, this episode would be remiss if I do not talk about how cooking at home can be a challenge, which is likely why most of us do not do it, because life gets busy, right? Life gets very busy, especially if you're in the States now, living in a high inflation environment. You may have to work overtime to be able to get more money to make what you used to make in a regular 40-hour work week. You now have to work doubles because you need to make more money in order for your family to be able to survive. And that increases the temptation to just get convenient processed foods or like convenient frozen meals. And it's hard to kind of stay on track. But I would encourage you that even though it's hard to stay on track, making sure that you manage your time is critical. We already talked about, planning your meals in advance. That's huge. Making sure that you use meal prep techniques. You have your containers to separate out what it is that you're going to be cooking and that you batch cook. Again, those one pot meals, those sheet pan dinners are really going to help you ensure that you're still cooking satisfying food for yourself and for your family, and you're not having to compromise on flavor. And again, do not underestimate the power of cooking hacks. Things like a quality knife, things like a slow cooker. If you have a knife that is worn down and you can't chop a tomato or you can't chop an onion without having to do that same cut 2 or 3 times. Now, I'm not saying you need something super duper sharp, but when your knife is dull and it's now becoming more of a hassle for you to leverage this in your kitchen versus being able to just go out and buy another knife, right? In this example. I would also say, don't feel like you're doing this by yourself, right? If you're struggling for inspiration, of course, with social media, it's so easy now to find like-minded people that would think the way you think and that are inspired by cooking podcasts and cooking social media sites and cooking blogs and just everything cooking. I'm sure you can go and it's a couple clicks away for you to find inspiration to keep you motivated and make sure that you're consistently nourishing your family appropriately, right? When you engage with other people that have a similar passion as you, it really helps you enhance your own skills and build your own confidence to learn new techniques, which is going to make this journey seem like a lot less of a struggle, because now it just becomes a skill and it becomes something that you actively want to do. And remember, there are going to be mishaps along the way, and that's totally fine. This is a learning process. Just be willing to make those mistakes and be willing to learn from them as well, right? It is important to remember that cooking and consistently cooking is not about perfection. It's about nourishing yourself and the ones that you love. Allow your kitchen to be a space of creativity, joy, and expression, and don't make this feel like, it's my duty, it's my job, it's a chore. Because when you begin to look at things through that particular lens, it becomes something that you don't want to do, compared to you looking at it as, wow, it is such an honor and it is such a privilege for me to be able to do these things for my family, to be able to cook for my family, and to be able to provide for my family in this way. It is a way for me to express my love through the flavors that I put in my meals, and really just keeping that sense of joy alive in every single meal that you create. And so, of course, I would encourage you as a part of today's episode to think about something that you identify as a challenge for you, a challenge that you face on this journey. I'm sure when you think about doing something new, like most of us, you may think about some reasons why it cannot happen. Don't be afraid to list those down, right? Things like, man, I don't have enough time. I don't necessarily have the skill set, or anything that you think may be holding you back from starting to cook more from home. And now when you have those limitations, write out next to those limitations a strategy that either we discussed today on our episode, or a different strategy that will help you overcome that particular challenge, right? We want to make sure that you are consistent in this journey. And I know that that's a lot easier said than done, because cooking is something that if we had enough time, we would do it, right? If we had enough time, we would do it. But it's one of those things that you have to do it, not because of you, if you don't care enough about what you put in your own body, but think about the ones that you love, right? And what this decision is going to do for them when you decide that you're going to cook more in your home, right? I would encourage you to also sign up for a cooking class near you if they are available, right? Making sure that you feel comfortable and confident enough to overcome those challenges. So, of course, we've kind of talked through and unpacked a lot, but hopefully you've learned something from our discussions about the benefits of consistent home cooking, about establishing a cooking routine, and really providing strategies to overcome challenges. Hopefully you can be inspired and empowered to embrace home cooking as a regular practice. Implementing strategies such as meal planning and meal prepping, right? Finding those other chefs that may be in your neighborhood or in your small group at church, or they may be online, right? Getting connected with other people who are trying to be on the same journey that you're on as well. Making sure that cooking is a mindful, pleasurable activity that really is something that can sustain your family and be consistent as you become more engaged with and just love the cooking habit. And so, of course, guys, no episode would be complete without ending with a Bible scripture. So this scripture comes from Psalm 104, verse 14 through 15. You cause the grass to grow for the livestock and plants for man to cultivate, that he may bring forth food from the earth and wine to gladden the heart of man, oil to make his face shine, and bread to strengthen man's heart. Guys, so we know that God created this amazing planet. And as stated in this scripture, there is oil for our face and for bread. And there's wine to help gladden our hearts. And the earth is here for us to bring forth food. So we should do our part and help cultivate that in our own homes. So remember, guys, consistency breeds mastery and transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary. Bye, guys. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of The Key to Consistency. Wherever you are listening to this podcast, it would mean everything to me if you could rate it, review it, reach out to me on Instagram. Would love your feedback, would love to hear anything you like, anything you don't like. Please feel free to share this episode with someone that you think could benefit from it. And until next time, bye guys.